Hey everybody, welcome back to Candid Conversations with your CPA. Today we have Adam Cavanaugh with us, the president of Cannabis Credit Association. It's a new organization helping everybody out in the cannabis industry with transparency in the accounts receivable department and credit department. Adam, I'll leave it up to you to introduce yourself and Cannabis Credit Association.
Thanks so much. Great to be here. Pleasure. Yeah, I am the president of the Cannabis Credit Association, as you mentioned. We are a newly formed trade association specific for the cannabis industry. We are looking to transform the industry by sharing data, creating trust and transparency, and we offer our members a unique tool set to help them kind of navigate the current landscape. One of our big offerings is our debtor database. And so we are the sister company of Cannabiz Collects, which is the industry's only premier collections firm, and they've been operational since 2018. And essentially what we are doing is taking the data from the collections agency and porting it into our own proprietary database. And so giving our members at their fingertips access to over $90 million of bad cannabis debt, over 4,900 flagged accounts that have been sent to collections. And essentially, people are going into this tool, using it in a number of ways. First and foremost, to sort of assess risk when looking at potentially forging new partnerships. And then also for monitoring their current relationships, seeing if maybe an account has recently been sent to collections and may also be sporting a large, AR balance, and learning that, we need to get maybe more aggressive in trying to recapture our funds. We also are then collecting data from our members who share anonymously accounts receivables with us on a monthly basis, and using that data to build out first of its kind industry specific credit scoring, which we really think will be a major catalyst for change within this industry. It's something that once developed, people can take to the bank when it comes to accessing more capital. And it becomes an inflection point in that, people hopefully will want to better their credit scores in this industry so that more doors will open to them. And the number one way to do that is to pay your bills on time. And so if we can normalize this credit scoring, ideally, a lot of these companies who maybe are not habitually good on time payers will start to become that. And it then will also, start to close doors for these companies that habitually do not pay their bills on time. And so anything that we can do to kind of level the playing field, provide that level of transparency, I think will be paramount and is desperately needed in today's environment. So yeah, we're recruiting, companies of all different kinds from inside the industry or companies that consider themselves industry adjacent. We've got laboratories, distributors, brands, POS providers, lending companies, you name it, packaging companies. Anybody's welcome as long as they believe in upholding good business practices and want to join us on this transformative mission.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. And obviously, everybody's seen a couple of the larger failures that have been happening in cannabis, where it's like when a large to medium-sized cannabis company goes out of business, like there's a lot of bad debt left on the table. And that's becoming more and more prominent. Obviously, there's been some large failures out west. And so it's making newer cannabis companies just be mindful of it from the beginning. Which in traditional businesses or traditional industry, everybody kind of knows each other's credit scores. There's just a lot more historical data. It always comes back to a lot of just the data and how old is it. And cannabis being so new, they don't really have that much historical data, nor have they done a lot of credit for long. So I feel like a lot of these are new issues that we're dealing with in cannabis. And so I feel like Cannabis Credit is in kind of a unique position to essentially provide real problems to real or real solutions to real problems in the cannabis industry. But tell me a little bit about yourself, Adam. We all have a story before cannabis. So what did you do before the cannabis industry? And kind of tell me a little bit about your background and how you initially became involved in the cannabis industry.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, I fresh out of college, I had to do an internship to finish my degree, and I picked a small company that was paying interns, and it was called CSN Stores at the time here in Boston, where I'm located, and that eventually grew into Wayfair, which is now a pretty well-known name in the furniture and e-commerce space. And so I was there for 10 years, mostly doing operations roles, whether it was, warehousing or supply chain, logistics, third-party distribution. And yeah, spent 10 years there, saw the company grow from, kind of like startup early days all the way to public. And it was a fantastic ride. I got to go down to Australia for a while and live there and kind of work on a couple of different projects. And then from there, it was cool. I was there for 10 years, wanted to be a bit more, entrepreneurial, work in another startup and kind of recreate the magic. And so I found these guys who were buying a ton of furniture from Wayfair that were using it for short-term rentals. And it was a company called Flatbook, and they were pretty interesting guys. They were young guys. I was excited about their business model. And they hired me to be GM of their Boston market, which was their second market at the time. So they were based out of Montreal, Canada. And went from, this big company with all these people to working out of a storage unit in Boston and, providing hospitality and cleaning services to all these short-term rental units that we were starting to amass in the city. And that led me to cannabis by means of, we were at one point in time operationally running 350 Airbnbs in Boston. And, we had really scaled up our team and our organization, and we were going to be building in a sort of centralized lobby for all of these people to congregate and drop their bags off. And we wanted to make it a differentiated experience. And Massachusetts had just written the first draft of their cannabis regulations. In those regs were a provision for consumption lounges. And so we wanted to incorporate the consumption lounge into this like hotel lobby. And so
Nice.
I was enthusiastically over the moon, excited to take this project on. I sold weed in college. And so like the idea of being able to actually like work in, for a company that had some component of marijuana was really cool for me. And so I started going to a lot of the cannabis control meetings and starting to network and understand what was happening with consumption lounges. And we ended up scrapping the project, I should say, because one, it didn't seem like consumption lounges were actually going to be happening anytime soon from all of our fact finding. And two, the city of Boston started cracking down a little bit on short-term rentals in general. And so we kind of had to start pivoting the business a little bit. And so, but I was so interested in the space and what I learned through that process that me and a couple of friends started doing a little bit of a roadshow to try and put together our own brand that we were going to take to market for the cannabis.
What were you going to sell, or what was the brand?
So we didn't have like a formal name yet, but we were playing around with different ideas, but we really wanted to create a brand. And so we started just going to like Colorado and California and meeting different people and networking. And I actually sent a LinkedIn message to Chris Jeffries, who was the CEO of Leafly at the time. And we started chatting, and he was just like, man, I don't think you want to start a brand in this space. Like I've seen a lot more. I know like Massachusetts is a new market, but I've been in this industry for a while. I've seen the pitfalls of, how much capital is needed. How much time and energy goes into doing this. Why don't you just come and work for me? Like Massachusetts, I need to hire someone in Massachusetts. I like your background. I like how you've kind of scaled up some of these other companies. Would you be interested in being our first general manager and really helping us navigate all of these East Coast markets? And so I started So I said yes. I was like, okay, you make a lot of good points. I
I
was
would
liking
agree.
the job and getting to work for a cannabis company that, at the time was doing so many cool things, whether it was like comedy shows and they had like strain teas and there's just a lot of neat things that Leafly was doing on the content side of things. And then they had this really cool idea to start operationalizing dispensaries for online pickup. And that played in very well with my skill set from Wayfair and from Sonder in terms of supply chain and
Hmm.
a lot of the different things we were doing. So it felt like there were great synergies. And so, I joined up, and my other two buddies that I was working with on our project both also ended up in the industry, working for a big MSO. And so it was cool. We all like landed nicely
Nice.
and found our way in, which was cool. So maybe someday Voltron will reassemble, and but for now we're kind of all in our own little swim lanes. And I was at Leafly for 5 years until I started with the CCA a couple months ago.
Very cool. Very cool. That transition, because there's like two transitions, right? Going from these like really large publicly traded company, which that in and of itself had to be a really cool ride to go from just startup to IPO, but then also starting back over at Sonder with a smaller company where there's some bright founders, some bright initial management teams, but the actual surrounding areas, although a startup is very sexy on paper, it like the reality looks like your home office or a warehouse when it's like I know we're sexy on paper, but this doesn't really seem that sexy. And then transitioning into cannabis after building it back up. So when you made the transition kind of into the cannabis, or even just from a large company to a small company, what challenges or obstacles did you encounter personally trying to making those transitions, and how'd you overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the shift from larger company to startup, or also within the cannabis industry, is you need to be
Yes.
uh, prepared to wear many hats. At a larger company, you typically have, there's a person for this, there's a person for that. You can go to
Yes.
the expert for, help with this project or that project. Going into this space, and especially in cannabis, I was finding that, we didn't always have the most best technology, right? A lot of it was, getting scrappy. And so using things that I learned, like writing SQL, became very valuable to, and then teaching others too, within the companies that you were working in to you become a mentor and a coach in a lot of ways too, because you want to share your knowledge base. And so that was really interesting. I also found that, you know, getting into cannabis. And so at Sonder, we were doing like a ton of like business development work for real
Mhm.
estate. And in cannabis, I was doing a lot of business development work as well, where you're doing cold outreach. And, for real estate, most contact information and all of that stuff is fairly easily accessible. In cannabis, not so much. It was scraping through like people's licensing applications and finding like phone numbers, and you're like, okay, this guy owns a convenience store and now he's applying to own a dispensary. How do I get in touch with him? Okay, I'm gonna call the convenience store and see if I can like get a phone number or an email. And so like
Yeah, yeah,
getting
guerrilla style.
getting really scrappy in terms of figuring out how to get this information. There's no like CoStar database that just has information on properties and who owns them and their contact information. A lot of it is networking and talking to people and finding out who they know, going to events, reading name tags and saying, "Oh, okay, you're that guy," and let's chat and like try and figure out how to do business together. So it does become a lot more hand to hand. I've found in this space versus some other traditional industries.
No, I would agree. I would agree. And that's kind of a funny thing too. You really hit the nail on the head. Is like when you go from like larger co to startup co, there's no like you can't punt anything because there's not 10 departments, like in finance. Like there was just departments within departments, teams within teams. And so there was some specialist for everything within the organization. And so like you knew who to talk with, like just usually the person who was there 5, 8, 10 years, they would always be able to point you to somebody to give you the answer. Whereas in cannabis and just startup companies in general, you like you can't punt a lot of things. It's like if you're the CFO, you're figuring out everything from that perspective. If you're the sales director, you're figuring out everything from that perspective. And it's for me, it's a lot of the data. Is like in larger companies, the data all lives in specific data pools, and you just talk to the person who knows how to extract the reports from the data pool. But like we're building a lot of this in startup companies such as Cannabis, where it's like, and even if they think they have a data pool, they know it's not 100% reliable. It's like the best data pool that they have. And
Hmm.
so to your point, it's like you can't punt anything. Educating your team on how we do things as because once we solve the problems for a company of this size and then it scales to this next phase of growth, you kind of have to resolve the problem and re-educate everybody of like, yes, when we were less than 5 million, this is how we did the sales and purchasing process. Now above 10 million, this is how we do the sales and purchasing process. And ideally you build it right the first time, it shouldn't change much, but like it does change because there's more locations, there's different flows of supply chains, so it does become a little bit more hand to hand and scrappy kind of once you get into the industry where you almost realize what you took for granted at some of these other companies. And it's like, huh, I never thought like that was like a special thing. And then you come to a startup company and you're like, oh, actually like having this very dialed in process is something that's, almost foreign here. Which is kind of leads me on to my next question here is you've been in the industry with Leafly for a while and now the credit biz. And so it's pretty awesome. Definitely, you have like 5 years in cannabis is a lot longer than 5 years in any other industry. So, with the constantly evolving landscape and everything that happens in cannabis, what are some current trends or events that have caught your eye recently, and how do you see them shaping the future of the industry currently?
Yeah, yeah. So I think, what's been most interesting to me, starting at the CCA and talking to so many of our members and our prospective members and getting on these calls with folks on the money side of the business is how big of an issue uh, trade credit has become within the space. There are a lot of companies now operating with some form of trade credit, and there frankly are not a lot of repercussions for not paying your bills on time. You can't take a cannabis company, to bankruptcy, right? So there's not a lot of ways to necessarily drive on-time payments, and there's no accountability in the space. And so, at Leafly, when I was there, we would see it in that we had large accounts, some of the bigger names in the industry that were not paying us on time. And sometimes my job, became chasing people down for money. And then, towards the end of my time there, we were looking at, you know, how do we write some of this stuff off? When do we write it off? Figuring out all of the mechanics around like the sales cycle and whether or not we should continue selling to some of these companies that are sporting large balances. And so that was sort of a very, I would say, insulated view of what was happening. And as I've started here and started talking to more companies, especially throughout the industry, my eyes have been widened to how big of a problem this is. And I've got companies
Yeah,
that are telling me that they're essentially acting as banks for a lot of these other companies and lending them
yeah,
money, and they'll try and collect, and they'll hear that these guys are opening another location but can't pay them on time. And they're like, wait, whoa. You owe us this money. I can't believe you're spending money at the same time. Or hey, we need this money that you owe us. I don't care that your tax bills are due. You need to
yeah.
pay us on time. Like, that is not an excuse that I find acceptable. And so it's really been very interesting to see. And I worry about the long-term implications that this is having, and hopefully we can be a catalyst for change. And some of these markets are already really deep into this hornet's nest
Yeah.
that exists today, and hopefully some of these newer markets we can start to kind of curb behaviors and roll out these credit scoring systems, and that you know, provide accountability before it starts to become the shit show that it is in some of
Right,
these other
right. This
markets.
beast.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you want to nip it in the butt before it like even grows, just from like a business to business perspective. Like as the CFO, it's like we're always thinking through the risk of the company. And for sure, like bad debt is a huge risk, especially when you're dealing with either larger order sizes, which a lot of these ones are. I mean, I don't know about you, but like my dispensary doesn't issue me credit. It's cash on demand. So it's like the retailers selling to the custom and consumers, not really worried about issuing a lot of credit. You go a little bit further down the supply chain where it's actually like the distribution centers, the processors, manufacturers, cultivators, like they're the ones having to issue credit on larger purchases. And so it's been interesting to see like who this is impacting the most and just understanding supply chains. It's like it does roll downhill. And it's just like, man, like this one person defaults, but then causes a domino effect of the next person, the supply chain to have cash flow issues. And then it goes down all the way to the genesis of this, which is the cultivators. Like we still got to grow this plant, cultivate it. It's still a plant that grows and needs to be like treated as such. So yeah, hopefully kind of east of the Mississippi as we have more emerging markets come online. Obviously, just their business SOPs will be impacted by what's happened leading up to date. And to be honest, a lot of it is, I would say, is traditional business practices that just like for unfortunately can't really be applied to cannabis because, like you said, we can't bring a company into bankruptcy for not paying its bills. Like, it just is what it is. And so I'm not a lawyer, so we don't have all of the answers, but yeah, it is definitely an issue. And like I was telling somebody the other day, is like the few that make the paper, like everybody knows about those failures, but for every medium company that hits the papers, like, oh, this one failed, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of other companies that have failed that owed other companies money. And so to your point, it's a little systemic. But we'll see how it affects things going forward. Obviously, it's going to drive change, like, issuing credit is going to become a lot more stringent where you're actually going to have to prove things out. And then, because for us, it's a little bit more on the sales side and the purchasing side. It's like, all right, because we're either issuing credit or getting credit. And so setting up proper SOPs around all that definitely kind of curve a little bit of that going forward. Um,
Yeah.
which I guess moving on to the next question is just currently it is a little bit doom and gloom. Kind of what are your thoughts on the next 3 to 5 years? Like us at Dope CFO, we're fairly bullish on the industry. I mean, we're biased because it's the only industry we service, but we think the actual markets will continue to grow. I mean, Minnesota just came on board. There's a few other ones that came online for adult use this year in 2023, and they're starting to kick off some pretty good revenues each month over month. And so we think it'll continue to grow. We do think that access to capital, it will loosen up. I mean, it can't sit on the sidelines forever. And there are better companies being created that are seeking capital that are just have a little bit more gray hair on their management team from cannabis. So I think they'll do better. But what are your thoughts over the next 3 to 5 years of the cannabis industry? How do you see it growing and expanding?
Yeah. I think, I'm cautiously optimistic as well. I
Yeah,
think,
that's a good way.
I think like there's still a ton of potential for growth and expansion. And like you said, there's markets that are going to come online, and hopefully, people will start to learn from previous experiences and get better at their forecasting and understanding some of these market conditions that, frankly, are tough to anticipate, right? You're in a state that's maybe surrounded by a couple of non-legal states, and so you're getting all this influx of traffic, and that can be fantastic. And then one of those other states, starts up adult use, and it's like, oh wait, we just lost a ton of people. So, I think people will get better at forecasting just by nature of the fact that like the growth will continue, and by that, like a lot of these states will kind of stabilize. So that I think will be helpful. And then I think, with all of this, talk of banking reform and rescheduling, we are in a place that's trending upwards when it comes to, providing these companies with more access to capital, like you said, perhaps like access to other businesses that have not touched the cannabis space before, whether it's technology or staffing solutions, things of that nature, where today, a lot of the cannabis industry works on, with ancillary companies that really provide those services at a niche level. And so it'll be interesting to see how the industry starts to reach out beyond these sort of niche providers to more established players from traditional business, and what kind of innovations that'll spur, what kind of efficiencies it will bring to the table. And then ideally, people start to become more sophisticated, more lean, more efficient, and can operate in a way that will really supercharge growth. And we'll probably still see a good number of mergers and acquisitions from, again, outside money coming into the space, and so I think that'll be interesting, and then also breed a lot of innovation as well. So I'm excited for it. It's been a really cool, I'd say, like, first 6 years of transformation, and the next like 3 to 5 will likely 2-3x that transformation, just by nature of the fact that, like, the world around us is evolving so quickly as it is, and what will happen in the cannabis space is very intriguing.
No, I would agree. I would agree. And I think the cannabis companies being created today, whether they're a first-time cannabis business owner or a cannabis business owner's third or fourth company that they're creating, they're being created with much more the numbers dialed in advance. It's profits over sales. Whereas, like, when you could sell a pound for $4,000, it didn't really matter how much it costed to produce it. It was a lot of profit there. But like now that the price has contracted down so much, 2,000, 1,000, less than 1,000, because there's not that artificial inflation. Now it's like, wait, are we actually running a good company? Because like when you had artificially inflated prices, you would have business owners who, for lack of a better term, like they weren't really that good at running a business. They were great at cultivating pot and selling pot, and they did that untaxed for a while. Or they got into cannabis at a time where there were many surrounding states and it inflated a lot of prices. So they had just this ability to run kind of lawless with their budgets. And so now these companies that are being created, it's like they have the budgets in mind from the beginning, where it's like when you couldn't do no wrong, the sales team was the rock stars. But now that like they're becoming traditional businesses with real margins impacted by real economies. Now it's like the finance team are the rock stars. So like, okay, like, yes, we need to drive sales, but we can't drive so much sales that we run out of cash to fulfill on it. And we can't just spend so much money on operation that we produce so much that we can't sell it. So like these companies are trending towards, and I would say maturing towards an actual like S&OP process where they're like, yes, we have a sales forecast looking forward that we're driving towards. And so it's been interesting to see that kind of continue. And I assume that will continue. And then, yeah, like there's already been this transition from bro to pro, just even while it's still federally illegal, of like persons like you and myself that have experiences in traditional industries coming into cannabis, and then what type of innovations can we bring? Because like a simple one that I find kind of interesting is like just getting cannabis businesses to an actual budget that they're operating against, where it's like they have a real cash forecast going forward, where they can see sales budgeted to actuals, operating expense budget to actuals. Like just getting clients to that level we found is tremendously valuable. And some might claim to already be there, but like once we open up the hood, they're hardly there. They're not actually utilizing a finance function, which it's like in traditional companies, everybody has a finance function. Like any Fortune 1000 company will have a whole blown finance function because they know it actually makes the enterprise more valuable. So it'll be interesting to see it kind of transition towards more of this stuff and the innovations that come. Because to your point, once it becomes a little bit more easy to invest in, there is going to be more innovations. I would say there's been a lot of innovations just in the last 5 years from the outside, specialists coming in. So, no, very interesting insights. Wrapping up here, just final question is, as the cannabis industry continues to expand, what advice would you give to any individuals or entrepreneurs looking to either get into the industry or expand their impact in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost is get educated. There thankfully are a ton of ways to get eyes on the industry. There's a lot of great newsletters that I get in my inbox every morning that help me really keep my finger on the pulse of things. And so, I get hit up a lot just by, and I'm sure you do too, people that from previous lives that are like, hey, cool, you work in cannabis. Like, I have an idea. Can I run it by you? And you're like, yeah, sure. And get on some of these calls with some of these people. And, they're interesting ideas, but oftentimes they're nowhere in the realm of current regulations, standards, and things like that. So it's like, educate yourself first and foremost, know what the regulations are in the market that you're looking to go into, understand all of the market conditions. So step one is just really do your homework if you're looking to get into the space. And then I think step two is, it's oddly the thing I love most about this industry are the people. Or I shouldn't say oddly, it's a fact, I guess. Like the people are great. And
Unexpectedly, we'll say.
yeah, unexpectedly. But I think like people are very open in this industry to chatting and to sharing their experiences. And, it is so valuable to just start networking and meet different people and reach out to people on LinkedIn. Obviously, know what you're doing first and foremost so that you're not wasting people's time. But if once you do have like a clear direction, meet people, there's oftentimes a lot of people that you'll talk to that know someone else that can help you out or provide insights. And so it is a slightly smaller industry than I think most people would think. You see a lot of the same familiar faces at a lot of the same events. And so go to the events, go to some of these conferences, meet people, talk to folks, show up to some like, of your state's regulatory meetings from time to time and try and understand what topics are on the docket and why they're being discussed so that you can really have a full head of steam going into this. And then, you never know what kind of great things will come from it. I've met a ton of amazing people and opportunities have presented themselves out of, these connections. And so definitely network, know what you're talking about. And I think, from that, you probably will have a decent success story coming out of it.
Nice, nice. I would say that was my experience as well, as just kind of getting out there, talking with people. Like honestly, I remember going to my first three cannabis expos. They just all happened to be in Chicago, and it was near 2018 after that or something like that. But yeah, just people are pretty friendly in the cannabis industry. And so like getting out there, talking with them, and then even if you're already in the industry, it's like never stop learning. It's like there's regardless of like what vertical you're in, you can learn about other verticals. There's usually always a bigger fish out there. So even if you're a big cultivation facility, you can talk with larger facilities that they're going to have the problems that you're hopefully trying to grow into. And so that's kind of a pretty awesome part about it. And cannabis is still very much a movement. Like, yes, it's a tradition, it's an industry and it's becoming more traditional, but it's still founded on a movement. Me, for example, I live in Wisconsin. We have no medical cannabis program, no recreational cannabis program. I still get weed from my friend. Hilariously, I like to give him a lot of shit of like, where's the barcode? But yeah, it's still very much a movement because you have very, very logical states. Like we have the Milwaukee Bucks. They won the national championship not that long ago. So it's like we're a real state, and we still don't have cannabis. We got the Green Bay Packers, Aaron Rodgers, no cannabis. It's
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous. And so participating in the industry, getting involved, and even on the lobbying efforts at the state and local level is huge. And cannabis is such that just bringing some knowledge and then just instructing in the industry definitely helps. It's like stay, know what you're talking about. So for me, like I'm a CPA, so I just talk about the boring stuff, accounting, financial reporting, taxes. But everybody's learning from everybody. And so it never hurts to kind of offer up your insight and anybody who will listen. So no, I appreciate you taking the time to kind of tell me a little bit about your experience, your story, Adam. Um, Anything else that you'd like to say to my community, your community before we sign off and wrap this up?
Yeah, no,
Like
thank
where
you
they
so
can
much
find
for
you?
thanks for the opportunity. People can learn more about the Cannabis Credit Association at cannabiscredit.com. Today we are still very much a hand-to-hand mode in terms of recruiting our members. So we like to meet all of our members, going back to meeting people and learning things. And half of everything I've learned in this industry, I've probably just learned from talking to different people. So we like to do that, and we want to really encourage people to meet with us, learn about our vision, and join us on this ride. And so there's this kind of like, community aspect that we're building to all of this. So go to the website, cannabiscredit.com, schedule a demo. Odds are you'll be talking with me, and I'll run you through our platform, show you our cool tool set, and talk about membership, and hopefully get a lot of these companies on board and help them and us transform the industry.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Adam, solving a real problem in the cannabis industry of credit and what to do about it. So thank you so much. Be well.
Great to meet you or see you. Thanks.